This is Defenders TV Podcast, episode 52. We're back with Daredevil, season 2, episode 1, Bang. Welcome, Defenders, to the start of our season 2 of Daredevil coverage. We'll be talking about episode 1 of season 2 of the Netflix TV show called Bang. I'm one of your hosts, Derek.
I'm one of your other hosts, John. Welcome on board, everyone who is joining us for the first time, having found us maybe on iTunes or another podcast catcher by searching Daredevil. Welcome on board, and hello again to all the regular listeners. It's
Absolutely.
really good to have you for our coverage of Daredevil Season 2, this episode of Defenders TV Podcast, episode 52.
That's right, yeah. So myself and John are here today for our first discussion of this Daredevil coverage. I want to give a big thanks to Netflix for providing us with an early copy of this episode, so we're able to get it out while you're probably watching the episode for the first time.
Yeah, it's really unexpected and nice of them to send out the screening copy so that we could have a sneak peek, I suppose, if you will, of this first episode of Daredevil. So thank you so much to Netflix for sending in those copies.
Absolutely, and I hear our regular listeners wondering what this means for the podcast. Does it mean that John and Chris and myself are going to be binging ahead on the episodes? Well, the good news is that actually we're recording this on the 13th of March. John and Chris are both actually going to be out of the country until Daredevil gets released on the 18th. So actually, they're not going to be able to binge at all. It's brilliant. I'm able to live up to my quality ability to stop them binging Daredevil, regardless of whether they want to or not.
Yes, we are still being prevented from binging.
Yes.
Help us. We need a vigilante. If anyone out there can help, you know who to call.
Excellent. I'll make sure I duck behind the windows every time I walk I walk past. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, let me just give you a little explanation of how we cover our episodes. We'll be watching the episodes one at a time, not going on to the next one, not pressing that skip button, and recording our podcasts directly after watching them. That way we're going to be unspoiled for future plot lines, and you can be confident listening to our episodes that you're not going to be spoiled regardless of what way you're watching them. So you watch them at your own pace and you listen to our podcast at its own pace as well. So that's the way we cover them. We also then choose our top 5 points about the episode. They could be good, could be bad, depending on the episode. And hopefully through those top 5 points and a few notes, we decide whether we defend the episodes or not. So to make sure you get the episodes, just make sure you subscribe on iTunes. You can subscribe through our direct link, which is defenderstvpodcast.com/iTunes. Or if you don't use Apple, if you're an Android listener, you can catch us on any good or evil podcast catcher, like Podcast Addict, Beyond Pod, loads of other ones out there. Just search for Defenders TV Podcast.
And of course, one of the great things about watching the Marvel Netflix shows and any of the other Marvel films and TV shows out there is the community that chat, share, interact. So if you want to join us over on our Facebook page or group, just search Defenders TV Podcast and join in there. You can also follow us on Twitter. Just go to @DefendersCast. And of course, we will, over time, start to bring feedback in on the episodes of Daredevil Season 2 as our listeners send in some. And of course, you can always send in feedback at defenderstvpodcast.com, where you can discuss or share your thoughts, your comments on Daredevil Season 2 or individual episodes. Just send that in and we'll be sure to read them out during the course of our review and discussion of each episode.
Absolutely, and if you could do one thing for us, if you could just pop the name of the episode that you're talking about in the subject line, just to make sure we don't read ahead on spoilers for future episodes. As I said, we're not going to skip ahead on the episode, so it'd be great if we didn't get spoiled. So excellent. Have you watched the first episode of Daredevil? Make sure you have, because our podcast is going to be spoiler-filled from this point on.
Spoilerific,
yeah.
Absolutely. So Derek, what do you have for us on this episode? Who were the movers and shakers behind the first episode of Daredevil?
Well, the first episode, like the pilot of Daredevil, was directed by Phil Abraham. He directed the first episode and the second episode of this series, and he's directed the first episode of season 2. So great to have him back on board. He did a great job in the first season, and we'll obviously talk through what he gave us in this episode. And the episode was co-written this time by Marco Ramirez and Doug Petrie, the new showrunners for the show. They took over from Steve DeKnight, who did the first series, and Drew Goddard, who started out the show. They've taken over as lead writers and lead showrunners on Daredevil for season 2. Great to have them doing this episode.
Absolutely. It must be a really difficult moment for them because obviously Stephen DeKnight and season 1 got such high praise.
Absolutely.
So they've really got a big act to follow in terms of the show, but also their predecessor. So this is a really interesting moment for them, I suppose, in their career, which is we'll give our thoughts on the output of that, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. One quick note before we go into the synopsis for the episode. I have to say, I wonder when this episode was written and when the plan to release it on the 18th of March came about. There is definitely a connection to St. Patrick's Day, which happened yesterday, if you're listening to this on the 18th. Happens on the 17th of March. Quite interesting that there's a reference to St. Patrick's Day. So happy St. Patrick's Day to all the Irish around the world.
Absolutely. Happy St. Patrick's Day.
And what a way to celebrate it.
Yeah. We hope it didn't end up like the Brannigans gang.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, John, do you want to tell us what Marco Ramirez and Doug Petrie gave us in this episode of Daredevil?
As the temperature increases in Hell's Kitchen, things are going well for Daredevil. His missions to clean up the streets of his city as he takes out petty criminals are going well, and this success is also reflected for his alter ego Matt Murdock, as his relationships with both Foggy Nelson and Karen Page are looking up. Professionally, their law firm Nelson and Murdock is seeing a huge increase in business in the wake of the conviction of Wilson Fisk. Unfortunately, however, the residents of Hell's Kitchen don't have that much money, so are paying with cakes and fruit. Meanwhile, in the absence of Kingpin, other gangs are looking to fill his void. The Brannigans, a New York Irish gang, are looking to take their rightful place as leaders of the city when an attack on their headquarters severely thins their numbers. The lone survivor of the attack, Grotto, goes to Nelson, Murdock and Page in an attempt to seek legal protection and escape the city and his hunter. Elsewhere, Daredevil's investigation into the massacre leads to the discovery that it is a highly trained vigilante working alone that is attacking and murdering gangs across Hell's Kitchen. Whilst attempting to protect their client, Daredevil becomes embroiled in a head-to-head battle with the unnamed vigilante. Bang. So, Derek, what's your overall sort of immediate impression of Daredevil Season 2? I mean, it's really, really exciting that it's here so soon, within 12 months of the release of Season 1.
Absolutely, yeah. My first impression is we are back in Daredevil's Hell's Kitchen. You know, this is a very different show from Jessica Jones, which we also covered, obviously, and a very different show from Agent Carter. We are back very square and center in Hell's Kitchen. I love the opening of the episode. I love the fact that it gets a step back up in that universe, and really looking forward to tons more, 12 more episodes after this one to go. So my overall overriding impression is we're back with Matt Murdock and the whole gang in that side of Hell's Kitchen, and pretty far away from Jessica Jones. John, what's your overall thoughts about the episode?
Yeah, I love the visceral aspects of all of this, and this is what I really enjoy about Daredevil is, it's bloody, it's violent, it represents that kind of inner city, poor area that it is infiltrated with gangs doing narcotics, drug running, fraud, all that kind of aspects. To me, it's brilliant. It's real down and dirty in the gutter.
Yeah.
And you have this lone vigilante of Daredevil looking to clean up the streets, and now we are in a sense being given a look at another type of vigilante who's also wanting to clean up the streets but has a different very different modus operandi absolutely in this. And I just really, really enjoyed it. I think there was a lot of teeing up things and reintroducing of characters here, which I think makes sense. Not everyone necessarily has watched season 1, and it's a good way back into, as you say, Hell's Kitchen and the world of Daredevil and Foggy, Karen, and the law firm Nelson and Murdock.
Yeah, totally agree. I think it's time to get into our top 5 points. And John, do you want to give us your first point as the kickoff of Daredevil Season 2 coverage?
I've just talked about blood, gore, and violence, uber violence. I really want to give my first point as the Happy St. Patrick's Day from the Punisher and his attack on Brannigan's gang. Amazing. It was just really, really interesting. I mean, it first of all sort of linked right back to season 1, the whole talk about, Fisk's being convicted, but also the power vacuum that really has happened. The fact that the Russians are dead, the Yakuza have gone silent, and the Chinese have left the drugs and ran basically from New York.
Yeah.
That's what Daredevil did to all these gangs, and the Kingpin at the end of last season. And so here we have this ambitious Irish American gang in New York really looking now to take its rightful place. We see a Mr. Nesbitt, there's the dogfight. Again, it's all looking a bit seedy. There's their private bar and all of this. And actually, it looks as though that there's an immediate attempt to try and take out maybe what they consider a traitor or an informer. Mr. Nesbitt's kind of walking around with a whiskey bottle and a whiskey watch, and it seems that just before the gang is attacked by this lone sniper who you don't see at all, that it looks like he's about to smash it across the head of one of the other older men who sat down at the table.
Yeah.
He's walking around, pacing around, being quite threatening. It's a real nice tense scene for that reason. As people seem like they're still a bit hungover, having hair of the dog, and all of a sudden the bullet takes him out, and it looks like he was about to smash open the bottle onto this guy's head. And it's funny because after the attack, after it's all gone down, that guy's phone, that mobile, goes off with a hugely cheesy tune.
It's the Irish washerwoman, very well known Irish
very well known,
tune.
But not cheesy, but it's well known. It's kind of maybe cheesy in some circles or passé possibly. But, that tune goes off, and you wonder who's calling him, because it looks, he's the guy that was going to get the bottle right across the back of the head.
That's right, yeah.
So, he was the traitor, but what's that phone call about? Are we going to see anything about that? I love that nice little kind of, why are they showing this, first of all, was kind of sprang to mind. And then it was, well, that was the guy who was going to get knocked out. And then it's like, well, how will this play out? Maybe either later on in the episode, which we didn't really see, or maybe further on down the line in season 2.
Yeah.
So I really, really like this. And all 15 men just taken out, and their St. Patrick's Day celebrations a long distant memory, because they have no memory, because all their heads have been blown, split like a melon. Absolutely, really, really good. Their celebrations really didn't turn out the way they were hoping.
Yeah.
And are a great off-screen introduction to the Punisher.
Yeah, absolutely. I was frantically writing notes the whole way through this scene. I was thinking, okay, so the Irish are going to be like the Russians in this season. This is definitely going to be a really central group of characters. Oh, now we've got Nesbitt. We know that he's battling one of the other guys, the leader of the Brannigans, and then they're all dead. It's just a really shocking moment. I did not expect that to be that to happen to all these characters. They were given speeches like as if they had references to the Westies, who were an old Irish gang in Hell's Kitchen, who controlled Hell's Kitchen back in the 1920s. They were giving those kind of references, if kind of building up this group, because we didn't see an Irish gang in the first series, So I just assumed that this would be our big other bad guys, the guys that Punisher and Daredevil possibly would team up to take out, I loved the scene. It's a great opener for the Punisher. It's a great opener for the show, just to show the kind of character that he is. It's really taken them out like he's a predator. You know, you see the bouncer that's on the front door. He hears some footsteps behind him, turns around, and the street's empty. Then you see the gunshots coming out of nowhere, and that's it. You don't have any reference to Frank Castle or the Punisher for the rest of another 20 minutes, I think, of the episode. So
at least, I mean, it's really in the hospital then, towards the end of the episode, that we then actually get our first glimpse.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we'll talk about that one a bit later on, as it's towards the end of the episode. For my first point, I'm going to take in some other elements that have changed because of what happened in season 1. There's been some big changes in Matt and Foggy and Karen's life because of what happened in season 1. I love that they're showing Daredevil is now cleaning up the streets. He's able to work kind of with the cops without them knowing, effectively. This opening sequence before the main titles, where he's taken out some diamond thieves who seem to be running away from the cops and shoot one of them. I love, obviously, the first time you see Daredevil in his full outfit is in a church as he takes out the final one of these robbers, and then it cuts to him standing on top of the rooftops in Hell's Kitchen as a smile graces his face. You know, nice touches there, nice moments where you realize that he's really doing what he wants to do. He's able to take the criminals out in the city.
It's such a great entrance for Daredevil here. You know, he's back. I mean, the opening sequence where all you see is the camera panning across New York City and you hear the sounds, and then the gunshot is the call to action for Daredevil. Yeah. It is a really, really nice opening sequence, I felt. I didn't even think that the opening credits hadn't rolled at that stage. I just thought that it was straight into episode 1. And then obviously you get the credits roll with that great music again. Mm-hmm. And yeah, it was just a nice opening for Daredevil. It was really good, I thought.
Yeah, definitely. And then we cut into Matt, which is the other changes that we see. Obviously, the alter ego of Daredevil. What I love here is it shows the impact of what's happened with him taking out Kingpin. The practice has become really popular now with local people in Hell's Kitchen area. Now they're the ones that took down the Kingpin. They're seen as the protectors of the area, the law protectors of the area. Love the kind of it's actually in the Daredevil film as well, the Ben Affleck film. This whole concept of the locals paying with cakes and paying with bananas and pastries. Yeah. I think there was a little bit of it in the last season, but they didn't have that many clients. They only had 3 in season 1, and this episode shows they had 3 in the first hour. So it's obviously becoming quite popular, but not very profitable. Kind of like that idea as well.
I like some of the cases that they take as well. Uh-huh. In particular, like, it made me chuckle, like the defiled statue of St. Peter, where the guy's dog has humped it till completion.
Nice.
And then being punched out by some angry priest or congregation member. Like, that just made me laugh, this idea. As we all know, dogs like to raise their legs, hump around. So yeah, I thought that was it just felt right for this law firm that, you know, they would be on the one hand dealing with someone's immigration papers, but at the same time something as small scale as a dog doing what it likes to do. Yeah. Hump St. Peter.
Yeah. Really enjoy that. It's really good fun, isn't it? Also love the fact that the gang are off drinking in Josie's again together. They get some time out together. Really good scenes there between the 3 of them, getting a lot of interplay, and, you know, you can see a little bit more of the kind of Karen and Matt relationship there. Is something kicking off within the walls of Nelson and Murdock, do you think, between Karen and Matt?
It seems as though there's a lot more telling looks and knowing sort of eye drops and smirks between the two, or at least from Karen.
Yeah.
Definitely. And I think, you know, Matt can hear that through the heartbeat, and that was a nice touch that sort of has come through from season 1.
Yeah.
And it is also our lead into Grotto as well. The lone survivor from Brannigan's bar. But yeah, no, the pool scene was really good, where to some extent she takes on the role that most people would expect a man to do in that situation, where she comes behind Matt Murdock to to show how he should be queuing. And that was it was just a nice touch. I liked that. And obviously then in Nelson and Murdock's, they have that sort of awkward feeling or sense, I think, between the two of them.
Yeah, I love that pool scene. It really reminded me of the 80s film, The Colour of Money, the one with Tom Cruise in it, the sequel to The Hustler, I think, if I remember my movies correctly. I really like that touch, and again, he didn't take the warning from Foggy from season 1 about listening to people's hearts to tell whether they're lying or not, that could be a bit inappropriate. He uses his little trick again to see if Karen is interested in him the way he thinks she is. I like that. I like those touches, bringing it through from season 1. Really, really cool. One of the other cool things I like about it is that he's now able to use his powers in front of Foggy. He specifically uses them, I think, 3 times in this episode or twice in this episode, right in front of Foggy, and tells him that he's using them. It's kind of cool to have that dynamic building up after season 1 where he was hiding being Daredevil effectively from Foggy so much.
Yeah, and it's a nice situation where Foggy is acting as his foil, sort of at the massacre scene where, as well, you get that great camera look through the bullet wound or in one of the torsos.
That was pretty gruesome.
Yeah,
wasn't it?
that was pretty cool. You get that, but essentially Foggy here is acting as sort of almost like the foil to Matt Murdock. Matt Murdock is sat there, he's listening, he's sensing, he's smelling, he's tasting everything around him, whilst Foggy is almost keeping the police officer occupied with almost like a bumbling kind of chit-chat with him. And that was really, I liked that. I liked how he has taken on that role, that this partnership is starting to emerge.
Absolutely. And in that scene, it's nice to see Officer Mahoney back. So he was in Jessica Jones. He was in the first season of Daredevil as well. And this is Foggy's childhood friend, I guess you kind of call him. I love the interplay between those two characters as well, where effectively Mahoney's kind of giving him some friendly advice and very much telling him to stay away and keep away from this area. He's a lawyer, not a cop, so he needs to keep clear. Really enjoyed that. But that's my first point, just about the relationships in light of what happened in season 1. John, do you want to give us your second point?
Yeah, it kind of builds on the relationship aspect really, and that is members only pork chop. This made me have a huge smile across my face as the biker dude in front of the Dogs of Hell bar calls Foggy to task. Foggy is there to try and meet a childhood friend called Smitty in order to get some lowdown on the crime and massacre against Nesbitt and the Brannigan gang, the Irish American gang. And I think it was symptomatic for me. I just felt Foggy in this episode had such a really meaty role on a number of occasions here. You have him in particular the Dogs of Hell scenes for me, where he's playing that bumbling kind of fool almost, and that's like his defense mechanism, where to keep him alive. It's his survival mechanism almost, I suppose. And I love the fact that he's gripping his bag when he's out with one of the bikers who's essentially gone out and taken him out to beat him up.
Yeah.
Because Smitty has been killed in another attack which fits the MO of the Brannigan attack. So we all assume it's the Punisher, this lone vigilante again. I just love his bumbling through. He tries to talk himself out of a situation, but just gets himself deeper into it. Yeah. So he says, "No, I'm not a Fed. I'm a lawyer." Of course, the next thing, snooker cues are up in the bar, and it's like, take him out, beat him up, for being a lawyer. And gradually, he ultimately gets what he needs to get, though, from that whole situation, which is info on the massacre that went down against the Dogs of Hell gang. And so, whilst on the face of it, he almost looks ineffective, he gets the information he needs, he survives, he doesn't get beaten up, and it's an absolute roaring success. And I love, again, that partnership now that Foggy has with Matt Murdock when he's Daredevil. That's extended from just simply the avocados at law, Yeah. It's really good to see. And not only that, but, we do see him here sort of, just you're bleeding at the base of your skull after the opening sequence fight that he has with the diamond thieves. They're walking back, and there's just that nice little chit chat between Nelson and Murdock, and you have this. You're bleeding from the base of the skull. So he's also taken on almost like a caring role for Matt as well.
Yeah.
He's very sort of very much looking out for his friend in more ways than one, and has now become really integral to Matt's own alter ego Daredevil, which I really, really like, actually.
Yeah, I also like the touch that he's lying to Karen about what Matt's doing with his life, saying that he has a drinking problem, and that's why he's got so many bruises and damaged every day coming into work. That he's, the reason he's falling downstairs or walking into doors is because he's drinking a little too much whiskey, perhaps. I like that touch, because now, the relationship with Karen is obviously going to have a little bit of an effect there, so potentially Daredevil might seek some Alcoholics Anonymous advice with Jessica Jones, do you think, in future? Will they set up their own little Marvel AA, do you think?
Well, absolutely, and I should have done a whiskey watch that I'd done from Jessica Jones with respect to Nesbitt. I think it was a Jameson's, but
I'd hope so, because we got no Irish whiskey during Jessica Jones, even though we were looking out for some every week, so I hope there's a bit of Jameson in here.
That is true, definitely. But Derek, what's your next point?
Another one kind of connected to these ones. I love how active all of the characters are in this episode. When you're coming back on from a very strong season 1, which was really about Kingpin and really about Matt Murdock and what was happening with them, and a lot of the other characters, while great and really enjoyable, felt kind of ancillary in some episodes. This episode kicks off hopefully where I believe the show is intending to go this season. Each character has their big moment. You mentioned Foggy's big moment where he goes to the Dogs of Hell bar, but Karen also has a couple of big moments throughout this episode as well,
big time,
where she gets to do some really interesting things. She's obviously the main person in the office, but she's kind of holding the place together in spite of the fact that nobody's getting any money coming in. She's holding it together, but she's also got a really active moment later on in the episode where she becomes the getaway driver for Grotto, without her taking what I can only assume is Ben Urich's car from outside of the hospital.
Must be, yeah.
She's what you say. It's an old friend of mine's car, but he hasn't used it in a number of months, so I presume that's Ben Urich's car that she's taken. I like that moment, and her being able to be a really active character. Without her there, Grotto would never have gotten away, right? That's what makes her such an active character in the episode, because without her around, she's not just standing around saying things or screaming as the damsel in distress. She's actually being central to the episode, which I really enjoyed.
Big time. It's really good that you called that out. It's one of my points, actually, and it was Karen and Grotto and her essentially being his defender and his helper. And I think in season 1, I mean, anyone who wants to hear our thoughts on season 1 of Daredevil, you can look back through the season 1 podcasts, obviously, at defenderstvpodcast.com/iTunes. Absolutely. And I think a number of us at certain points throughout season 1 did have our own little maybe issues with Karen and more with her character, I suppose, and just how it was being portrayed. But here it's very different. It's like maybe she's gotten used to this world as well, and the dangers that can come from taking sort of dangerous legal cases. And just the fact that she is stepping up and doing that, I thought was really, really good. I thought it took her character to another level for me, one that we didn't really see in season 1 so much in a day-to-day way. Of course, like, she had her big moments where she kills Wesley, and obviously she's battling with just the fright of the ordeal that she's gone through. But I think here, for me, it felt like it was integrated much more into this episode's storyline. I always felt Karen's arc in season 1 was slightly devoid from just the origin story of Daredevil that we kind of got, really, in terms of Matt Murdock realizing what he needed to do. And so and the takedown of Kingpin as a result of that, once Kingpin or Wilson Fisk had been identified as the big bad behind everything. I just felt like Yeah, it doesn't always work for me, but I still enjoyed it. But I think here it just felt like it was part of the three of them
Yeah.
helping out this person called Grotto. You know, you have Daredevil investigating the lone vigilante. You've got Foggy going to the Dogs of Hell club to find out information. And here you have Karen, you know, essentially looking after, doing a cover for Grotto, pretending that she's his wife.
Yeah.
Keeping him anonymous within the hospital and then looking out for him as and when, you know, the lone vigilante pops up. So it really felt connected.
Yeah, I love that moment with Karen where she's relaying the made up story that she has the past with Grotto and, you know, all the times they spent together, and then she goes, the nurse even cried at that moment when I told her that made up story, you know. Love that Karen's got these little moments throughout the episode. It does feel much better than last season for Karen.
That was really good. And I think she has another moment like that where she goes, just despite all his protestations, you know, she still loves him despite everything he says, because he's trying to leave and get up and she's trying to tell him no.
Yeah.
Like it's a really nice little touch to those scenes, I think. That was also one of my points. So Derek, what's your next point?
Yeah, my next point is Daredevil with the Mexican gang. I really like how much they're stretching what Frank has actually done and how they're investigating what Frank Castle has done in the area of Hell's Kitchen. We obviously see the takeout of all the Irish guys. They make mention of what happened to the biker gang the previous week, and now we find the Mexican cartel guys hung up in the meat packing district, or the meat hanging district, I suppose, of New York. Really great scene, and I kind of felt like something out of Alien or something like that, as Matt walks through the carcasses in the factory and then starts to see bodies of these men hanging up on the hooks, you know, and then finally finds one that's alive and takes him off the hook. Another really visceral, violent looking scene.
Absolutely.
You know, last season we had him put someone's head through a spike, or someone put their own head through a spike, and this season you've got Daredevil in episode 1 taking someone off a meat hook. They're certainly not shying away from showing these kind of scenes this season, which is good. But I like that it's opened up what Frank is doing, and I like that it's showing that he has been working on this project of taking out the gangs of New York quite violently.
Absolutely. I mean, for me, I wrote in my notes, this is proper serious. Like, Frank Castle is, like, he means business. We know he does anyway, but this is absolute, I mean business. You know, you're trussing someone up like a quartered pig, and, you know, this is a statement of how serious his intent is. You know, he's wiped out a gang, an Irish gang, as you say. He's gone after the biker gang, and now these guys are trussed up. For all of this, I kind of thought that he was going to pop out from around one of the carcasses and start attacking Daredevil. I don't know. Like, I thought there was going to be something, and then to see one of the guys sort of still alive, it felt slightly Seven-esque about it. Just, like, not in the same kind of jump fashion by any stretch of the imagination, but just the fact that he was still alive. I was just thinking, how absolutely horrendous must that be to be stabbed and hung up on hooks. So this was really, really good. It was a great scene, actually.
Yeah, definitely. And also in the scene, I like the kind of admission where it comes from the Mexican cartel member that this isn't an army that's been attacking the Irish gang. There is no they, it is only him. A great little moment. If you're not a comic book fan, if you don't know who Frank Castle is or the Punisher is, the reveal of the fact that it is just one guy going after the Irishman, that's the moment of the episode, really, isn't it? You know, this reveal that it is just one man that's on a mission to take them all out. You know, fantastic. We obviously hadn't seen the face of the vigilante at this stage, or the person at all. We'd seen nothing. We'd just seen Matt's investigation into who it is. So this is the first moment it's revealed that it's just one person.
Yeah, I mean, they say no one can escape this, no one can get away. Yeah, it's one man, it's not they. No they, him.
Yeah.
It's one man. Like,
there's no stopping what can't be stopped, no killing what can't be killed, which I believe is the Predator.
Yeah, it's so really, really good. Yeah, this was properly serious, and I mean there is talk throughout this episode as well of that these attacks have got the same MO, that they're targeting all these different types of gangs, that it's someone with a high skill level with regards to weapons and explosives. So all of this leading to highly trained militaristic dude in the Punisher.
Yeah, I love how they kind of reference it with the cops at the crime scene, where one of the cops goes, how was he able to shoot through a bulletproof vest on one side and come out the back and through the bulletproof vest on the other side? Like, who has these kind of weapons? Just showing you the kind of depth of this character, and really how knowledgeable he is about the military styles, I suppose.
Yeah, and we're hearing that the morgue is filling up pretty quickly with bodies as a result of the Punisher's activity. So that's, really cool as well, I think. He means business. And hopefully, from what we know of the trailers as well, this will really start to be his kind of point of looking at Daredevil and saying, I'm getting things done.
Yeah.
You're not. You're just kind of like, dancing around the rooftops, and you're not getting anything done.
Yeah.
So that was really good.
And the other big thing that I really liked about, obviously, having the Mexican gang involved in this, and the Irish gang, and the biker gang, that this is really like the Punisher version in the Marvel Max comics. Garth Ennis's run and Jason Aaron's run of Punisher, where he's going after the cartels, he's going after
big time
full gangs of people on his own to take them out and clear out Hell's Kitchen, and clear out New York, really, pretty much is what Frank does. He probably wants to clear out the east coast of America, to be honest, if he could, but I like this. It's really like one of those Garth Ennis books where it focuses on a group of a gang, making you believe that they're going to be the big bads of the issues or of the series, and they're gone pretty quickly. So yeah, really nice touch there. They seem to have used a bit of the Max history of Punisher.
And knowing again from the trailers that, is the big bad the Punisher, or is it also a big bad that has a more Eastern flavor to it? Absolutely. Like, I can't wait to see more, I want to, Chris wants to, we want to binge, we want to watch these things.
Not gonna happen.
I know it's not, but this is why this, as part of a Netflix show, is what is great, is that it makes you want to go from the first to the second and do that binge watch. It's the quality of the show and the episode that it makes you want to move on to the next. And the great thing is, you can.
Yeah. You
brilliant.
can. You can't, John. You can't.
No, I can't. I don't have the child code to put into the TV.
Exactly. I keep the PIN code locked up. You did make mention of it there, but just one point as well, that Nesbitt says to the Brannigans, he says the Chinese have disappeared, the Russians have disappeared, but the Yakuza are silent, which means they haven't disappeared. Hopefully we will be seeing them back later on in the season, John. I think we might be.
Absolutely.
Do you want to take us on to your next point?
Yeah, one of the other people that we saw and who has come back is Turk, which is really good to see, actually. I like the fact that Turk was proto Daredevil in the black suit, his first kind of mission and criminal that he stops. And here we have Turk now. He's out on parole. He's doing a gun deal with dubious guns that he kind of is saying, well, it wouldn't stop too much. They're not really that good. And yeah, it's the bad guy you feel for. He gets his hand caught in the trunk. The trunk door is like, the boot door is slammed against them. And then, you have Daredevil sort of just cracking his knuckles and putting him into a half Nelson just to get information about who this lone vigilante might be. But I love this just brief little nod to Turk and his season 1. Like, he's a great little character. He's been in Rikers Island, and one of the things that I liked was just how, when Daredevil's questioning him, his response is to say, well, it's to do with Wilson Fisk. And you see Daredevil's face just kind of like crumple underneath the mask, going, And it's like, no, it can't be. Wilson Fisk was convicted. He's behind bars. And like, Turk is like going, no. What you don't understand is that you've created a space for other people to inhabit, and that's what they're doing. Like, the line behind Wilson Fisk is now moving forward to take his place, and if you remove the next one, then so another one will come and take his place. A bit Hydra.
Yeah.
But where people see the opportunity, even if it's the underground or criminal economy, here you go. And I love that sort of exchange. Yeah, but poor Turk's fingers being worked on by Daredevil. Just the cracking and the crunching. You just had to feel for him. There's one final thing that I noticed as well. Daredevil was using his nunchucks a fair amount in this. I loved them. I loved how he used them in the opening sequence, as well as now when he sort of knocks out the guys who are trying to deal with Turk. So good use of nunchucks so far.
Absolutely. Yeah, great to see Turk Barrett back in the episode. I suppose, in the canon appearances of Turk Barrett, we saw him getting taken out in episode 13 of Daredevil, getting sent off to Rikers Island. He was beaten quite badly. In the prequel comic for Jessica Jones, we see Jessica beating him up and getting information out of him. He seems to be your local source of information if you can just beat hard enough. It's kind of the way for poor old Turk. I did draw a little frowny face on my notes as I was seeing poor Turk get beaten once again in this episode in his intro scene, you know. But great to have him back. Really, really good to keep those connections. And Turk,
absolutely,
Turk,
yeah.
as we mentioned last season, is a very regular character in the Daredevil comic books. He is the low life criminal, but never attains any higher status in Hell's Kitchen. He's just always around doing slightly shady deals, definitely on the other side of the law, and gets beaten quite a lot by Daredevil for info. So really good to see him back.
Definitely, absolutely, yeah. So Derek, what's your final point?
Has to be Frank Castle in the hospital, doesn't it? This scene is just so good to me. I thought it was so well played. You know, we didn't see, as I mentioned earlier on, you don't see John Bernthal at all in the episode. And then when it comes like the Terminator. There's a great
Big
moment.
time.
Yeah, he's walking into the hospital with the shotgun at his side. You just see it from the back of his head. And then he takes out a cop in the quickest, most fantastic of ways, taking his gun off him, throwing it in the bin, and then you know he's unstoppable. You know this is a force to be reckoned with.
But this is the Punisher. He doesn't just take the gun off the cop. He takes the gun off the cop and then uses it to very quickly knock him out with it.
That's right.
Before he chucks it in and closes the lid after him.
Yes.
You know, he is publicly spirited,
Yes.
publicly minded in all his actions.
Mm-hmm.
However violent.
Absolutely. So welcome back, Frank, and welcome into the universe of Daredevil. I'm really, really excited just after this scene, how well it was put together. Really good intro to the character. You know, I'm actually a bit of a Punisher apologist. I really did enjoy, particularly the Thomas Jane version of Punisher. Really enjoyed that film. I've watched both of the other two films. Warzone was probably a little bit hyper violent. It wasn't the right type of violence for me. It was a bit hyper violent, a bit too much. Of a kind of a crazy mix of trying to be a comic book movie and also an R-rated film. Whereas I think they're getting the kind of style right for me for this episode anyway. Let's see how it plays out for the rest of the season. But just my final point is just about the intro to Frank. That's my final point. John, do you have a final point for us?
Yeah, it is, as no surprise, also the Punisher. Mm-hmm. It is the Punisher, Frank Castle, showing up. Just on your point with regards to the hospital, I love how Karen just doesn't hesitate and she just goes, and I love the chase that he does after them, and you see the spray of bullets hit the wall as they're running down the stairs and so on, and you think they're getting away, but then you get the final sort of part where the Punisher has Grotto in his sights from the top of the hospital, and lo and behold, Daredevil turns up, and this is a great fight. Daredevil has to some extent the match of the Punisher here on the rooftop.
Yeah.
But then the Punisher just comes back and it's like he slams his head into the air conditioning vent on top of the roof, and you just see Daredevil fall to the floor, but then chase after him, and then you have that awesome fight where he's like using sort of parts of the wall to punch and knock down the Punisher. But in the end, and this is where we finally now know that what the Punisher says is bang, not beg, not any other thing, but it's bang. I mean, I remember in the main hall at New York Comic Con when we saw the glimpse of this, and it was like, what did he say? Was it bang, beg, baby, well, whatever other word begins with a B? And now we have, because as he pulls out the ankle holstered pistol and shoots and just goes bang. Yeah. And like, fantastic. Now, for me,
so good.
Such a great fight. You want to see that. I mean, the fight along the corridor in season 1 was spectacular and mind blowing. And here, I think, you've got to have good fight sequences for Daredevil, whether it's with nunchuck throwing, the fists, the parkour sort of roll into a fight. And here we have these two different fighting styles, the brawler, the veteran, the fists, the guns ultimately, and knives, that they're as much a part of the fight for the Punisher as the nunchucks are for Daredevil. And I just loved this fight. It was really good. I do feel that Daredevil caught the bullet, even though he falls off.
Oh, right, yeah.
I don't know whether his hypersense allowed him to spot it at the last moment. I mean, obviously Daredevil can't be killed. He can't have been shot, but
in the first episode season,
but it looked like he put his hand up towards his head as though he catches the bullet, and maybe just the fact that he hears the pressure of Frank's finger go and the trigger mechanism within the gun. You can imagine how Daredevil would be hypersensitive to that, and also then the bang, that he's able to kind of track it and almost take it out of the air or something.
Right. Interesting.
I know, it's because obviously Frank ain't going to miss at that range.
Absolutely, and obviously, listeners, once again, we do not watch ahead, so that's a theory coming from John there. I'm intrigued to see if it's accurate when we get to watch the second episode. A huge shout out to Philip Silvera, the stunt coordinator of this show, and his team, including Chris Brewster, who doubles for Charlie Cox. They really do pull it out of the bag. Every time we see a fight sequence, you can tell that there's a certain style to Daredevil. They've now introduced a style for the Punisher, which, as you say, is he's very physically brutal here, and different to Kingpin last season, who was also physically brutal when he fought Daredevil. There's a difference there. You can tell they've worked very hard to make this a good toe-to-toe between these two characters. I was really surprised that we had the meetup of the two characters in this episode. First episode, and you get Daredevil versus Punisher. Didn't expect that.
Absolutely, yeah.
I expected there to be a lot more of the background. As I was watching the episode as well, I thought, this will just lead in. It'll build up. It'll lead into episode 2 or 3, and then they might have a side by side. Having the two of them fight in the first episode was great, and showing Punisher potentially winning it as well is an interesting choice for your first episode of Daredevil.
Definitely. I don't think he did win it. I definitely think Daredevil is alive. Yes. He has to be. Yeah. Again, maybe he could duck quickly enough so that the bullet is actually just a graze across the head or the body, wherever but it looked like he caught it, or something to that effect.
Either that or Foggy puts on the costume in episode 2.
You might have to go back to Fogwell's gym and also get a new tailored Daredevil suit as
Possibly.
Well. But I think, remember from season 1, the material of that suit, if it's anything like Wilson Fisk's suit, and it's made by the Gladiator,
very true,
then there is an element maybe of bulletproofness about it.
Very possibly. Well, that's our top 5 points about this episode of Daredevil. Do you have any notes at all for this episode, John?
Yeah, no, I've got 2 notes. I love the fact that Foggy says, him getting beaten up, him being Daredevil, it kind of links into one of my points is not just your problem anymore. What will happen if you get caught? You know, I really like that.
Get disbarred or whatever.
Yeah, you could get disbarred from the legal profession. I'm on my own. Yeah, do I take up the suit and have to sort of train and get myself the Marvel 6-pack? So that was a nice little thing there. And I think, again, we had through as a theme across this episode, this idea that it was really hot in Hell's Kitchen. The temperature's rising. It's heading northwards of 100 degrees for the 4th day in the row.
Yeah.
You have that, and you do have, there's really, at the crime scene of the massacre of the Irish gang, the cop says Hell's Kitchen is about to explode. There is this element that it is becoming pressured and temperatures are rising, and things are really starting to come to a tipping point again. So that was kind of an interesting thing, I think, for this episode, to set that up for the rest of the series.
Yeah, definitely. I only have a couple of little notes myself. I love that Matt shows off that he can actually play pool. After Karen's teaching him that he is kind of showing off, or not showing off, I suppose, to Karen. But I love that he's able to play pool with the senses that he has. Thought that was a lovely little touch. And the only other little note was just a comment from Foggy that telling Karen that you're a drinker or having a drinking problem is not as bad as telling her that you dress up in your underwear and go out and beat up people in Hell's Kitchen. And Matt says it's not underwear. Underwear would be comfortable, which is a nice little touch on the fact that the Daredevil suit does look very figure hugging and does look very sore, I would say, in certain areas of your face and certain areas of your body as well.
Absolutely, and of course, Foggy does pull out the point which has ramifications right at the end, which is, you are not bulletproof.
Yeah.
It's all right going against petty criminals, but when you start to go after more serious people, who knows what will get ranged against you.
So our other host, Chris, did in fact get the chance to put in his thoughts about Daredevil Season 2, Episode 1. He sent them on to us to our feedback email address, which you can also do at feedback@defenderstvpodcast.com. Here's Chris with his thoughts.
What's up, guys? I'm so sorry. I can't be with you guys when they're recording, and unfortunately, day job has got in the way. So as of when you are listening to this, I am somewhere in sunny California, watching Daredevil by myself and recording it and sending it back to the lads so they can stick it in the podcast. Much like I want to stick it to my job, the fact that I'm missing Daredevil Season 2 day and date of release. It's killing me. But anyway, to the good news. I've watched Episode 1 by myself here. Oh, it is brilliant, people. I don't know where to begin. I'm so happy that Charlie Cox is back. And I don't know how to put this, but he's now just becoming an endearing part of that character of Matt. Like, it's just, I can't see the separation. That cheeky smile, the charm. There's a particular scene where him and Foggy are just walking and talking, and it's just brilliant. Just absolutely brilliant. And of course, then we have some of the fight scenes in Daredevil, the Daredevil style, but I'll get to that in a bit. Of course, you can't have Murdock without Foggy, and Elden Henson is back, and he is the perfect, I don't want to say sidekick, because he is and he isn't. He's his own character, but they seem to have taken the stride from Series 1 and run with it. And now you can see that they've grown into these characters a bit more. Spoiler warning, Foggy and Matt are still friends, even after Season 1. Obviously, there's going to be probably some backlash. I've yet to see it. I want that explored, but let's see it and see. Now, Deborah Ann Woll, I love you. You're great. But you're still slightly annoying. Less so than Season 1. I know last season I really hated on a lot of the Karen's character. It's not as bad right now. Let's wait and see how it kind of rolls out. The romantic triangle that is Matt and Karen and Foggy, that is back by the looks of things. Let's wait and see. But additionally, I think there's another nice subplot of just Karen and Matt. It's good. Let's wait and see where that goes. To the opening. The opening of this series is fantastic. It shows Daredevil as a almost Dark Knight character in Hell's Kitchen. He is the man who is going through Hell's Kitchen, criminal by criminal, and cleaning it up. And it's fantastic. And you see the billy clubs, and they're back. And by the way, please don't. Spoiler warning again. The suit. The suit is gorgeous. There's going to be backlash. I think people are going to give out a lot about it. But the suit's there from get-go. And mwah. I love the look of it. I love the texture designs, the colours. It's perfect. Should they've gone for all red? It's probably another variation. They'll go the red and black because the black's the body armour or whatever. And then they'll move on to the full red at some later stage. Now let's get on to Frank Castle. You barely see him in this opening episode, but it's so, what you do see is fantastic, and the sneer and the level of athleticism when these two fight is just beautiful. Let's wait and see how it goes. I don't want to put all my eggs into one basket yet and say that I'm going to like the character. I will put my hands up and say I didn't like the 2 films. 3 films potentially now, but we'll wait and see. But definitely 2 films. Warzone and then the Punisher. But let's wait and see. I'm reserving judgment. I want to see where they go with this character, how they bring it in. Will they bring in the family part? Will they bring in the ex-cop or military? Let's wait. He's kind of come in with a lot of violence. My gut's telling me that season 1, what we thought was violent, is nothing in comparison to season 2. But if episode 1's to go by, it's just going to take a bit of time to build up to that level. But there's blood there, so the squeamish, look away when you have to. So I don't want to give away too much, and because I can't be there with the guys to discuss this, I just wanted to give you those quick initial thoughts of what I've seen. I do have Easter eggs, but I'm saving them so I can come back and talk to the guys. So you'll have me back for episode 2 or episode 3. I'll be maybe even be dialed in. Just wait and see. All I can say is that this is the perfect tempoed opening for the show. It's just enough action, just enough intrigue, just enough character explanation. But yeah, it's good. Does it have its flaws? It's Daredevil. It's going to have 1 or 2. But no, overall, I think they fixed it. They really seem to have figured out exactly what worked in season 1 and upped that ante. And yeah, they don't seem to find out some of the things that didn't work in season 1 and they're still there. But hey, look, overall, it's great. We haven't seen any of the other characters yet, so let's wait and see where that goes. So to wrap it up, am I excited? Yes. Am I nervous or apprehensive in terms of where this is all going to go? Yes. Am I happy it's back? Of course. This is one of the best shows out there. Still some of the best TV that I've seen in a long time. His powers, the thing I want to remind people of, Daredevil's always been that kind of, yes, he's part of the Avengers, the new Avengers and stuff, but he's always been a low kind of second tier. He's not like a Spider-Man or a Hulk or a Thor or an Iron Man or Captain America. He's a guy with super senses and balancing and stuff like that. He gets the kicked out of him a lot, and I think the show season 1 showed that. But season 2, I think, will bring it, because hopefully we'll see Punisher beating the crap out of Daredevil a lot. But let's wait and see. Oh my God, I'm so happy it's back. So happy. Anyway, that's me from sunny California. Let's see where this goes. And here comes the Daredevil. Welcome to Hell's Kitchen. Woohoo!
Delighted we got the opportunity to share Chris's thoughts as well. He seems to be just as sold on this season of Daredevil as we are, and really looking forward to having him back on the podcast as soon as we can.
So, I think with that, Derek, do you defend this episode of Daredevil Season 2, Episode 1?
I do defend this episode. I am so happy to be back in the city of Hell's Kitchen with our vigilante superhero, and now his counterpoint, I suppose, the vigilante supervillain that is the Punisher. I like the fact we didn't get a name for the Punisher throughout the episode. No Frank Castle, no Punisher. He only says one word, just bang. And he has that real Terminator menace about him. Really good idea to play him that way. Also like just being back in the company of Foggy and Matt and Karen. They seem like they've developed their relationship and developed their friendship quite a lot since the last season. They're all back together as a good gang of friends, which is nice to see. It's a nice kind of welcoming place to kick off the episode. And also, hey, since it's St. Patrick's Day this week, nice to have an Irish gang, even though they didn't last that long in the episode. Really do defend this episode and can't wait to get on to episode 2. So, John, do you defend this episode of Daredevil?
I do. I defend this episode of Daredevil. For me, I am going to give this 4 pork chops out of 5. For me, this was a great reintroduction to the world of Matt Murdock, Daredevil, and Hell's Kitchen, and I thought it really helped reintroduce Foggy and Karen, and I thought in much more inclusive ways into the main story plot than we saw in season 1, actually. That they felt really involved in what Daredevil was doing. Obviously, Foggy is now aware of Daredevil, is helping him, and I love that kind of new element to this relationship, that it's not just the avocados at law in the Nelson and Murdock law practice. So I really, really liked that. I also loved the fact that we were introduced to this new gang in the Brannigans, which was then taken away by the introduction of the Punisher, of Frank Castle, even though he wasn't given that title. Again, a great way of introducing the character. It felt really like a great nod to the comics, the Marvel Max comics, which just fits with this character. So really, really like that. And then through all of that, with the meat hooks, with the Mexican gang, with the massacre with Turk, it just really felt welcome back to this world. It was really good. So for me, that's why I defend it. This is a really difficult episode to get right. The first season was so well received. This, had potential pitfalls here, but I think they've done it really well. I can't wait to see the Punisher and Daredevil go head to head. I can't wait to see how Foggy and Karen are placed in danger. What will happen to Grotto? The guy on the run now. Is it Frank Castle who's the big bad? Where are the Yakuza potentially here? All of these things are still to play out, and I can't wait. And we've still got to see Elektra show up.
Absolutely, and as you mentioned, who was making that phone call to the Brannigans? Yeah,
exactly.
Really intrigued to find that out. And John, good to let you know, you'll be able to watch it directly after we finish podcasting this episode. So listeners, thank you very much for listening to this episode. If you want to subscribe to the podcast, you'll get our Daredevil podcasts as they come up in the feed. You'll also get our podcasts about Agent Carter, which we are still covering. All you need to do to subscribe to the podcast is just go to defenderstvpodcast.com/iTunes, and you can just subscribe to our full Defenders podcast. If you want to just subscribe to the Daredevil podcast, we do have a Daredevil on Defenders TV podcast show up there on iTunes as well. If you're not that interested in Agent Carter, but sure, why not subscribe to Defenders TV podcast and get all of our coverage of the Marvel Cinematic and TV universe?
Absolutely. And of course, we'd love to find out what are your thoughts or comments on this first episode of season 2 of Daredevil. What did you think of the introduction of the Punisher, of Frank Castle? What did you think of the trio of Karen, Foggy, and Matt? All of these things, please send in your feedback and thoughts and discussions to feedback@defenderstvpodcast.com, or join us on our discussion group on Facebook at Defenders TV Podcast. Just search Defenders TV Podcast in Facebook. And again, you can also follow us and tweet with us and to us and at us on @DefendersCast over on Twitter.
Yeah, it'd be great to hear some feedback about Daredevil as we go. Obviously, we'll play it as soon as we hear it, or as soon as we've gotten to that episode of the show. If you've gone through all 13 episodes and you're on your rewatch now as you're listening to us, send us your thoughts about some of the individual episodes. If you want to record a snippet of yourself talking about the episode, of your thoughts, you can record an MP3. Pop it into that email address, feedback@defenderstvpodcast.com. We'd love to share it with the listeners as well. Really good to be back in the world of Daredevil, and really good to be here with our listeners, as always. This isn't a members-only club, so you're welcome, Porkchop. Talk to you again soon.
Thank you so much for listening, and talk to you very soon. Bye.